And joining us now, politics correspondent for the New York Times, Michael Gold, CNN political analyst Natasha Alford, and CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig. Elie, starting with you here, the Colorado Republican Party, we've been waiting for an appeal. We've been waiting for either Trump's campaign or the Republican Party to move. They have done so. How do you think this is going to turn out?
Well, as expected, we are starting to see appeals to the Supreme Court. The bigger question to me is, will Trump's team actually appeal? I'm not so sure the Colorado Republican Party is going to have standing. I'm not sure they're going to have enough of a dog in the fight. Certainly, Donald Trump will. But I do think the Supreme Court has to take this case. And I do think the Supreme Court will reverse the Colorado Supreme Court and rule that Donald Trump is not disqualified. And we can see one of the reasons why unfolding day by day. Just yesterday, yet another state, Michigan, rejected this 14th Amendment challenge. And I think we're in an untenable situation if we see 50 different states adopting 50 different procedures and reaching, well, so far the results have been fairly uniform against the 14th Amendment with the exception of Colorado. But this one's screaming out for the Supreme Court to intervene.
Let's turn to Caitlin's reporting on Jack Smith and this filing in the election interference case.
Yeah.
The fact that a defendant has wide latitude to defend themselves is not without limits here.
Right.
So what's going to be the limit on Trump in this case?
I think Jack Smith's motion here, it's common. I used to always file this kind of pretrial motion, and I think it's smart and necessary in this case because you want to set the outer limits. Yes, a defendant has very broad latitude to defend himself. No, it's not anything goes. Issues about political motivation, claims that this is pushed by the Biden administration, about the security measures at the Capitol on January 6th are irrelevant to the charges here. Yes, he can argue he didn't have intent. He can argue prosecutors have failed to meet their burden. He can argue the facts, as alleged by prosecutors, are untrue or unproven. But he can't go on to this rant here.
I thought... You're nodding, Michael, and I thought what Jack Smith wrote in the filing his prosecutors is, quote, a bank robber cannot defend himself by blaming a bank security guard for failing to stop him. Just using very plain examples of how ludicrous some of these arguments can be.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the question of all of these trials is how much courtroom and campaign are going to blend, right? And I think with the civil trial in New York, we saw a big blend. It almost felt like another campaign stop. Trump would come, he would go to the courthouse, he would stand outside the courthouse, then he would be on Truth Social posting about what happened in court. In this case, one of the things I wonder is how much it will even matter if you keep these things out of the courtroom, because Trump's argument about these being political prosecutions is so pervasive at this point. It's hard to imagine a jury in D.C. hasn't heard it. I'm from D.C. Politics is kind of in the air there, even if you're not involved. I'm sure it is a very worthy idea to keep this out of the courtroom and keep the case focused on the legal question. But at this point, this is such a campaign message for him that it almost feels like it doesn't matter too much what happens inside. He'll keep saying it outside.
And Trump is so good at branding, right? Every person that he gives a little name, a little nickname, it sticks with them. This idea of the Biden Injustice Department. If you keep that out of the courtroom, again, it doesn't keep it from the public conversation and the court of public opinion. And the public is just looking at all of these cases. Again, they may not be able to tell you the details. They can't break it down like Elie. But it builds...
No one can break it down like
No one can break it down like Elie, but it builds this Trump narrative that he is a victim and this is all a coordinated attack.
This is the difficulty of picking a jury in this case. I mean, Natasha and Michael are spot on. When everybody knows the person, when everybody sees the tweets or the Truth Socials, how do you manage that? This is going to be a challenge for the judge. I mean, during jury selection, you're going to have to try to vet that out. Do you have preconceived notions? And during the trial, it's going to be a day-by-day policing effort.
To Elie's point, I actually learned in reading Elie's notes before the show, which is actually a fairly normal occasion, that this is a normal filing. This is something that Elie, when he was a prosecutor, would try and do. And yet it feeds directly into the Trump narrative, which he laid out on Truth Social very shortly after the filing, of they're trying to eliminate my ability to speak. They're trying to, the campaign, the convergence of campaign and legal. And I think that's my question. If you don't know that this is a norm, that this is what a prosecutor does, you immediately take what Trump's saying and say, that's right. And it almost feeds his narrative to some degree.
It's so funny because I feel like it's so rare for us to be able to say this is normal when we're talking about one of these Trump criminal cases. But it is true. I think most people don't know the ins and outs of the legal system. They're not paying a ton of attention to what happens inside. And Trump has already outlined this narrative around these trials. So if your narrative for the last however many months has been they're trying to suppress me, you look at all these gag orders, they're trying to take away my right to say what I want to say, and now you have this filing, it really plays into his hands.
But on that point, Elie, just quickly, the Maine Secretary of State today, tomorrow, and the next couple of days, it has the power to decide whether Trump is on the ballot there. That's different than in other states. Yes, he can appeal. But now Trump's team is pushing back, saying she should have to recuse herself from this decision because of past comments she has made. We've seen this with a number of judges, politicians, attorneys general. past things they've said about Trump coming back to potentially bite them.
Yeah, I don't think the Maine Secretary of State will recuse herself, but it is unfortunate. I mean, we've seen several decision makers supposed to be in positions of impartiality, judges. 2 of the judges involved in his cases have donated money to anti-Trump political campaigns and declined to recuse themselves. That's not ideal because it's not necessarily that the people are biased. Some of what they're saying is objectively true, but it's the impression of bias. It goes to the public perception, and that matters in the justice system, too.
All right. I'm just rattling in my head when you talked about politics being part of the discussion in D.C. is every party is like, who do you work for?
Right.
Which makes me want to jump off a bridge.
It a little bit, if you can't tell.
Deeply, deeply miss Washington, D.C. All right, Michael, Natasha, Allie, don't go far. We got a lot more to get to.
We do, including this new